You have a plan. It feels explosive, a potential pivot point in your life, and every cell in your body, it wants to tell someone. It wants to grab that external validation like it's a lifeline. But here's the problem. The moment you vocalize that plan, you stop building it and you start selling it. You are no longer in the forge. You are in the marketplace. Now, in this episode, we're exploring the strategic necessity of silence in power dynamics and why the most successful figures in history kept their mouths shut when everyone else was shouting. By the time we are done, you will understand why your silence is a structural advantage, not a weakness. Think of your mind as a locked room. In the Renaissance, this was the literal environment of power. It was flickering candlelight, the scratch of a quill on parchment, and the heavy door between the conspirator and the court. That physical separation was essential. If you were a Medici or a Borgia, you didn't leave your blueprints out on the table for the messengers to see. You held them in that locked room of your mind until the very second they could be executed. Because here's the thing, the world wants to pick at your ideas before they are fully formed. It wants to debate, to critique, to offer helpful advice that actually dilutes your intent. The room is only powerful as long as the door is locked. And honestly, this rarely sits right with me. We are social animals. We are wired to broadcast our intentions. It is how we signal competence, how we gain allies, how we feel secure. But in the context of real, maneuvering power, this instinct is a self-defeating behavior. Every time you share your progress, you are giving away the map to your position. You are turning a private development into a public conversation. We live in an era of building in public, of radical transparency, of status updates. But Machiavelli would look at your LinkedIn post or your casual dinner table talk, and he would see a massive tactical error. When you reveal your method, you give others the blueprint to undermine you. You invite opposition before you have even had the chance to fortify your defenses. Consider the case of Octavian. Like, when he was 18, he was a nobody. Julius Caesar had been murdered and the sharks were circling Rome. Everyone was watching Mark Antony, the big, loud, established general. They were watching the older senators, the ones shouting the loudest in the forum. Nobody was looking at the quiet, sickly boy in the corner. Cicero, one of the most powerful orators of the age, famously dismissed him as a boy who owes everything to a name. They assumed he was a puppet they could manipulate. But while they were busy arguing and positioning and declaring their loyalty to the loudest voice in the room, Octavian was listening. He was moving in the shadows, assembling power piece by piece, quietly securing alliances that nobody knew existed. The senators thought they were managing a pawn, but they were actually building a throne for their own executioner. When the dust finally settled and the others were exhausted from their public posturing, Octavian emerged as the sole ruler. He didn't win by being the loudest. He won by being the only one who didn't tell everyone exactly what he was doing until it was already done. This works because of something called information asymmetry. If I know what I am doing, and I do not know what you are doing, you have a massive advantage. You can anticipate my moves. You can build countermeasures before I even start. But if I stay silent, you are forced to guess. Human beings are terrible at guessing correctly. We tend to project our own fears and biases onto the mystery. When you stay silent, you are not just withholding facts, you are actively making your opponents anxious. They start wondering what you are up to, they start over-calculating, they start reacting to ghosts. You are essentially letting their own paranoia do the work for you. And if you think this is manipulative, well, you are right. It is the nature of the strategic environment. If you want to build something that lasts, you have to be willing to play the game differently. Look at Charles Maurice de Talleyrand. This man served 5 completely different, often violently opposed regimes in France, from the French Revolution to Napoleon to the Restoration. How do you survive that? Most people were guillotined or exiled. Talleyrand survived by making his own intelligence invisible. He was the ultimate chameleon. He would advise, he would negotiate, but he never let his true loyalties or his internal progress become a target. At the Congress of Vienna, he walked into a room of victors who wanted to carve up France, and he somehow negotiated his country out of a death sentence. He spoke constantly, but he never really said anything. He mastered the art of the meaningful void. People thought they knew him, but they only ever knew the mask he gave them. He kept his real self in that locked room. I will be honest, I hate this. I hate the idea that I have to hide what I am working on. It goes against everything I want to do. I want to share the struggle. I want to vent the frustrations. I want to celebrate the wins. But the more I study this, the more I realize that the urge to share is often just an ego trap. It is not about the work. It is about wanting to feel seen. It is about wanting external validation for something that is not finished yet. The moment you get that dopamine hit from telling someone your big plan, the urgency to actually execute it starts to drain away. It feels like you have already completed it in your mind. I have fallen for this a dozen times. I get excited, I spill the beans, and then the project dies on the vine. The sharing acts as a substitute for the doing. This is the same principle that breaks people in negotiations. Think about the last time you bought a car or negotiated a salary. You revealed your floor, the lowest you would go, the timing you needed. You thought you were being honest and fair, but the other side took that honesty and immediately used it as a pivot point to move the goalposts further away from you. Your transparency became the very tool that stripped you of your leverage. In a power dynamic, honesty is not a virtue. It is a tactical exposure. If you lead with your cards face up, do not be surprised when the person across the table treats the game as a foregone conclusion. So where is the line? If you keep everything locked in that room, do you eventually forget how to be human? Is there a point where strategic silence stops being a tool for power and starts being a tomb for your own life? We have seen Octavian build an empire from the silence, and Talleyrand keep his head by keeping his mouth shut. But we have also seen the cost of that isolation. At the end of the day, you have to decide. Can you hold your own future as a private possession, or will you inevitably give it away in search of someone else's approval? That question doesn't have an easy answer, and perhaps it should not. There is a room inside your head. It is a secure facility, or it really should be. Most people call this their strategy, but in reality, it is the only place where your competitive advantage actually lives. Today, we are going to talk about why transparency is not a virtue, but a tactical error. We are going to break down the specific categories of information that, once leaked, turn you from a predator into a pawn. And honestly, this isn't just theory. It is the oldest game in the book. We start in the Roman Senate, 44 BC. The air in the Curia was thick, that specific metallic, ozone-heavy smell that precedes a thunderstorm. Caesar lay dead on the marble floor. The room was not quiet. It was a theater of panic. Every major player in the Republic, Cicero, Mark Antony, Brutus, was posturing, shouting, making their next move loud enough to echo off the vaulted ceilings. They were experts at the public game. They were screaming their intentions because they believed that public consensus was power. And then, standing in the shadows of a massive, cold column, was Octavian. He was 18. He was physically unimposing, a boy who looked like he had been dragged there by mistake. Cicero looked at him once and dismissed him with a sneer. A boy who owes everything to a name. They all looked at him and saw a pawn. Look, I have been underestimated like that, and it is a specific kind of lonely. But Octavian wasn't lonely. He was efficient. He realized that in Rome, looking like a threat was the fastest way to get stabbed. He wasn't playing the game of noise. He was playing the game of silence. The reason the Senate missed his rise isn't because they weren't smart. It's because they were looking for a man, and he was building an architecture. They were looking at his public behavior, which was nothing. and ignoring the 7 categories of hidden information that actually govern power. These are the 7 levers that, if you expose them, destroy your leverage permanently. First, your intent. If the enemy knows your destination, they can build a wall on the road before you even leave. Second, your burn rate. This is your time horizon. If they know when your resources expire, they just have to wait you out. Third, your resource depth. If they know how much money or political capital you have, they know exactly when to squeeze. Fourth, your allies. Who is actually funding you? If your opponents can pick off your backers, your house falls. Fifth, your vulnerability, your specific, hard-coded weakness. Sixth, your methodology. Not just what you do, but how you think, your decision-making process. And seventh, and perhaps most dangerous, your alternatives. Do you have a plan B? If they know you don't, they own you. Octavian guarded these 7 things with brutal discipline. While the senators spent their capital on the floor of the Senate, making speeches, burning bridges, revealing their agendas, Octavian was moving in the margins. But he sent private messengers. He secured the loyalty of Caesar's veterans through quiet, localized promises. He didn't issue press releases, he issued payoffs. The senators thought he was paralyzed by the chaos, but they were wrong. They were spending their capital. He was capitalizing his silence. When the clash finally came, the senators were bankrupt, and Octavian was fully operational. Now, let's bring this into the modern era. We have this bizarre cultural obsession with building in public. We are told that radical transparency is a virtue, a way to build community. I used to fall for this. I would share my project roadmaps, my revenue goals, my vulnerabilities on social media, thinking it made me relatable. I was wrong. It just made me a target. Consider a modern case study, the open startup movement. I watched a founder recently blog about their startup's specific burn rate, their runway, and their customer acquisition costs to gain trust. A month later, their primary vendor, who read that blog post, raised prices. They knew exactly how much the startup could pay before they went bust. The founder had handed the enemy a map of their own fragility. Transparency is not honesty. It is a tactical surrender. Think about salary negotiations. You walk into an office and you state your minimum requirement. You think you're being honest. You think you are fostering a relationship of trust. But you have just handed them the keys. They now know your floor. They know exactly how much they can squeeze you before you break. That is not a relationship. That is tactical suicide. Machiavelli understood this perfectly in The Prince. He wasn't advocating for evil. He was advocating for the protection of the source of counsel. He argued that if people know how you think or where you get your ideas, they can manipulate the source to manipulate you. It is about maintaining the locked room of your decision-making process. The catastrophic cost of letting people know exactly how you read them is that they change their behavior. You lose the data. They stop being themselves, and they start performing for you. So where does that leave us? We live in a society that demands we put our cards on the table. We are taught that secrets are inherently suspicious. Even in our personal lives, we are expected to be an open book. But here is the hard truth. Often, the people closest to you are the ones who weaponize your transparency the fastest. If you are forced to be transparent by the culture, how do you protect your critical objectives? It comes down to a simple binary trade-off. Do you want to be understood, or do you want to be effective? Octavian showed us that you do not have to be the loudest person in the room to own the room. Look at the Getty kidnapping. The ransom was paid, the negotiation occurred in total silence until the exact moment of exchange. It worked because the variables were controlled, not broadcasted. That is where your strategy belongs, inside the locked room of the mind. If your plan is visible, you are not building a foundation. You are simply sketching the target for the people who want to tear you down. There are rooms in your life that you keep locked. Now, not because the contents are shameful, but because they are tactical. We all possess a private archive. The plans we've finalized, the leverage we've secured, the specific, cold-blooded conclusions we've drawn about the people in our orbit. Most people treat these rooms as incidental, just places where they happen to keep private items. But Machiavelli, he saw them differently. He grasped a truth that most people live their entire lives without understanding. The architecture of what you reveal and what you bury is the fundamental mechanism of power.